And just as our speakers come up to the front, I would just like to say our colleagues in Safefood and ourselves in the Food Standards Agency, we co-chair the All-Ireland Food Poverty Network, and we see this event, this annual event, as increasingly important. So thank you for your time today. And our aim is to bring people and organisations who have a burden around food poverty and have experience and knowledge together. So we really welcome your questions now for the next half hour or so, if that's okay, both online and also within the room. But first of all, thank you to Paul and Elena and Sophie for your presentations this morning. So just as some of the questions start, maybe if I could ask one question, and then if you put your hand up, we have some roaming mics going around in the room, and we have colleagues as well who will capture the questions online, and they will be made available to me here, so if that's okay. But just maybe initially, Sophie, if I could maybe just ask you one wee question just on the back of your presentation, please. What's the difference between framing research and opinion research?
Now, this is a question we get asked a lot. Sometimes people say, well, I've seen similar stuff to this. I've seen, this is polling, isn't it? Now, opinion polling can be a good sort of bellwether for maybe what's happening with those more deeply seated mindsets. But essentially, we're just going a level deeper when we're doing that framing research, looking at those sort of shared ways of thinking that are that bit sort of harder to move. So, opinion polling and framing research can go hand in hand. But I'd always say, even if you're sort of seeing a change in some recent opinion polling, those mindsets probably haven't changed, and it's good to be aware of them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Paul, could I maybe just ask a question, just as people maybe, and start to think of your questions, please. Really insightful how you've brought the people of West Belfast within the room here to us today. But how much focus is there on how we talk about poverty from those working at the front line, really working of tackling this issue? How much sort of focus is there on how they talk?
Yeah, I think it's become a big part. It's for me and the others that work around me. I think when someone comes and they're experiencing hardship, they're experiencing poverty. When they come to us, I mentioned it earlier, there are many obstacles before they come to that front door, and for us, the approach has always been, dignity be at the forefront of that approach. And I think on a human level as well, certainly for me and for others, it's about putting yourself in the shoes of an individual who comes to that place and maybe looking for support and help. And for us, it's always been about solidarity. It hasn't been about charity. It's been about community as well. And I think with that approach, we've certainly made it easier for people to come and avail of what we're trying to do at Foodstock.
Okay, thank you. And what really brought it home to me as well was when the Minister mentioned this morning how some people maybe stand outside the door until his constituency office is quiet before people come in and ask for vouchers. It's the dignity is so important in all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Elena, did you find there was much stigmatism of food poverty in the media?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I suppose the thing with stigma is that it can be quite subtle sometimes. And so while you might not have super explicit stigmatization of people experiencing food poverty, it can occur in quite subtle ways, and often that's through an othering of individuals who are seen in reports. So I don't know. For example, one of the things we saw was you have this construction of the new working poor, and so if you have the new working poor, who are the old poor? Who are the other ones? And if they're not working, are they held in distinction then to those that are working? And is there a side judgment call being made there? And that's how sometimes that the stigmatization can work. And we've seen it in say work I've done previously on HIV-related stigma, how you have people who are deserving, who are seen as more deserving of treatment, and others who are less deserving of treatment, depending on how they became infected with HIV or how they acquired HIV. And so I think you have this similar dichotomization sometimes, where you maybe have the good poor and the not so good poor, and that can be quite subtle. but it can build over time, and then it can kind of prime people, as you mentioned, to assign blame then and to assign responsibility. And then it becomes a question of the individual and the individual behavior and what they're doing wrong and what they're not. So so while it might not be very explicit all the time, it can be there through those constructions, and then I think that can, as I said, build up over time. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Question here? If you maybe just say who you are. I know you, Jennifer, but just for the people online as well, that would be really appreciated.
Jennifer McGonigal from the Food Standards Agency. Paul, my question's for you, just around, I suppose when you were speaking, it was what you were saying was really moving, and I suppose the language that you used was really moving around, community, solidarity, hub. It's all bringing it together, and I suppose my question really is, how did you come up with the idea to call a community solidarity hub? Because it's brilliant, but just from, I think there's so many things that we don't sometimes know what to call things, and how did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, I suppose it just came naturally with the ethos of what we were trying to achieve, and saying the fact that, again, it's that thing, it doesn't sit well with me around the amount of food banks that we have in our communities. The approach, it's all about the approach, and it's about that messaging that this is about community solidarity. It's about people pulling together to pull each other up and out of the situation they find themselves in. So it kind of came naturally, to be honest with you, because it was happening around us. I tell the story about people coming and giving their time. That's very much a big part of what we do. It's community-led, and it's very much about solidarity rather than charity. So it was very natural.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Beth Bell with the Food Ethics Council and also Belfast Food Partnership. And I really love that you all in different ways touched on rights and human rights, and I'm really interested in the right to food. And I wonder, I think the thing that we need much more of is that kind of tangibility, rather than kind of the right to food sometimes as a slogan, and then what does it look like? And I'm struck by something like, we all know that we have a right to remain silent. That's a really kind of fundamental thing that's in the public consciousness. What does that look like for a right to food?
Thank you, Beth.
I love that question, because I feel like what you're kind of getting at is that how do we show, not just tell, which I'm a bit obsessed about, to be honest, on all sorts of issues. And I think, there's so many ways we can do that. It's spelling out, why food is so essential, and you can do that through literally explaining it, through, lifting up people's voices who are most affected by this issue. All of those ways, it's if we show it, then it becomes more than just a slogan. But you're absolutely right, that kind of concept of rights, if we don't spell it out, it can be a bit intangible, or sometimes do some work we didn't intend it to. But I think when backed up by a story it's about social justice, it's about solidarity, and it's about this is an essential need, that's when it really comes alive. And that's when, I've seen so many people campaigning on this issue, and they bring it to life by doing exactly that.
Okay. Elena, have you anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I agree with Sophie in that if you can explain it as well. And so the example I gave earlier was around the CRPD, the Convention on Rights of People with Disability, and how that's articulated in, of course, people living with disabilities have the right to participate in society. And so if they cannot navigate down a street because there's obstacles there, that's a problem. And so I think we could probably, as I said, reframe it and using the tactics that Sophie talked about in terms of explaining why that food is essential for our well-being, for our health, for our ability to participate in society. I mean, all of the big occasions of our lives are often centered around food and enjoyment of food, and being able to share that with family and friends and whatnot. And it's such an important part of just what it means to be human and to have that dignity. And I think a lot of people, you talked about relatability. And that's so important, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. And so if you can explain that, and I think that will bring people along then when it comes to, when it comes to voting time and when it comes to politicians on your doorstep and going, well, what are you doing to ensure that people have can participate in society and enjoy these rights that we all have a right to.
Okay, thank you. We'll maybe take a question from online just in the meantime, just for our online audience as well. Maybe Paul, this would be one for yourself. How does food waste stand up in the food poverty crisis?
I think we could always do more. Just as I was entering the building this morning, I was actually speaking to a team from Food Cloud in the south, and I think in terms of how they've approached food poverty in the south, I think they're streets ahead, and I think there's a lot to be learned from that, and I think that's why it's important events like today where we do have that all-island perspective to poverty, but also how do we practically respond and approach poverty as well, which is very helpful. But we've seen some great approaches in the south which has ensured that the right food is getting to people. When we think of some of the responses here, we think of food that maybe isn't as healthy and nutritious, whereas if we were to have better sort of schemes and collaboration in place with food producers, supermarkets and so on here, I think it would ensure that we could roll out a better response in terms of people getting access to food to keep them healthy. But I think certainly a lot more to do. It's about the awareness and getting a lot of the big retailers into the mindset about what we're trying to achieve. And that's been a struggle. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think certainly a lot to be learned from what has been done in the south of Ireland as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There's one question that quite relates to this online, if it's okay if I go ahead and ask it as well as you think of questions. What would be the next step then with big retailers and marketing schemes around the food promotion we see on healthy foods? Their focus is profit. What will change this? What do you think will change the big retailers and their focus on profit?
Well, they're not going to change their minds on profit anytime soon.
No, they're a business.
Unless there's a revolution. Yeah. Regulation, I think, is the only answer to that. They're not going to do it on their own, and they're not going to be convinced by evidence, and they're not going to be convinced by research. I'm actually working on food marketing project at the moment online, and have spent way more hours on TikTok than I ever cared to see how it's marketed to children and young people. And it is unbelievable. It is constant. It is a stream at young people and children all the time. And I think most of us who aren't in those spaces, and let's face it, probably most of us in this room, aren't cognizant of the extent to which kids and young people are just blasted with marketing all the time on those platforms. So it is the only way that is going to put any pause on that, I think, is through regulation and again so upstream,
Yeah.
But they're not going to do it on their own. Self-regulation isn't going to work there either. How you regulate certain spaces, like online, in terms of marketing, is a trickier question, I suppose, but probably you could give some advice on how we frame some convincing arguments around that. But yeah, it has to be regulation. And in terms of the retailers, we know that food store architecture has a massive impact on choices there as well. So I think we've been building the evidence base for years on these things and how these things shape our choices and our health and our well-being. And I think it's probably time then for policymakers to take the baton and actually start putting in place some rules and regulations that have teeth. I think.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Charmaine, you want to ask a question?
A quick question, please, Sophie. Thank you very much. You spoke about the predominant crisis narrative, and you also spoke about how the media has picked up on the narrative in relation to the poverty trap. So how can we collectively shift, if we follow your instructions, and I think we could do it as well as you, we would be making very good headway. But can I ask for your observations on how that shift can take place? The media, and I shouldn't be disrespectful in terms of addressing them collectively, but how can we do a better job in terms of getting a particular media to take? Why does one hold so systemically the crisis, and why did the other poverty trap get shifted? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. First of all, coming together and having that shared story is so massive. And I think that's why in the poverty space we have started to see some of those changes and changes in narratives, and kind of that previous narrative that we really saw in 2018 when we were doing that research of strivers and scroungers being gradually replaced with a story that is more recognising the reality of what it's like to be trapped in poverty, and why that needs to then be a case for all of our society to address. So, we've had the sort of the time for campaigners to come together with that shared story. That's partly what's really led to that shift. But in terms of, what is that other story that gets the media interested? This is kind of the million-dollar question that we often get asked in our workshops of, but if they like a story of crisis, how else do we replace that? And I think there's many ways that we can make a story newsworthy, but I would just always resist the temptation to go down the crisis route. And it can be hard because often we've been kind of, we have certain targets to maybe meet with how much we're in the media, and if we know that sort of just going out with this big bag problem is going to get a headline, but always just think about what's the consequence going to be of that headline. And if the story is about that urgency, just trying to bring some balance in of like, here's what we need to do about it. That in itself is a very positive change that we could all make, just making sure we're always backing up the problem with the here's what needs to happen, here's who needs to act. So it's not just a sense of like never-ending crisis. And I think, the more that we have solutions in our media and in our stories, the more that we can have that conversation about how do we make that happen, instead of just how did we get here.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions on the floor? I have one more online here. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
How are you guys? My name's Stefan. I'm one of the community food workers in North Dublin. I just had a question for Paul. So I've heard a lot. It's a common thing that you hear, like what we do on the ground is kind of a plaster for the wider issues and issues of policy and things like that. I'm wondering if you had any tips for like us on the ground of ways our organisations can positively influence policy change.
Absolutely. Again, it's the kind of direction I've went in. It's about creating that awareness as well and holding people accountable. But certainly in terms of the sheer levels of the work that community organisations, I'm sure like yourself, are doing on the ground, it's about asking for a response to that at a government level, be it local or otherwise. We haven't seen that. And again, I head back to the point where community organisations have stepped up incredibly over the last number of years, and even more so. And there's pressures with that, and I don't think sometimes the pressures are put across in terms of how this impacts those people who are involved. And I think that certainly needs to be respected and put across as well. But certainly, I think being vocal and a lot of the things, one thing I'll point to as well, it's just about showing people. I think when people walk into a room and see this happening, it takes people aback, And one thing, just to point back to something I touched on earlier, a pre-loved school uniform hub we created in the community, a very simple thing, where a space where people came together and shared these uniforms. We made it look like a shop, but the decision making around why we're at that, kind of lies at a number of fronts, and one of them was basically with boards of governors at our local schools. And as people were coming through the door, we had people who were in real distress as a result of trying to kind of be in a position where they could send their children into school with school uniforms. And we had seen this, and we found it very difficult to deal with that. And one of the things that I had done was contact all of the schools and say, could you send a representative and stand in the corner and listen to the testimony from some of these people? Because I'm sure it would change your decision. And I think we need to do that more. We need to get people in the room to actually show them physically what people are going through as a result of their inaction. And I think that's very important. And with that, we are seeing small changes, but we need to see greater change and hold people accountable for their decisions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Any further questions in the room in the meantime? There's one question here online. We're in a very restricted financial situation. What practical one thing would you change in the food system, if you could, that would make a difference for children living in poverty? So there's one thing that you would do to change in the food system if you could make a difference for children living in poverty.
Yeah, I might take that. So I think the one like very tangible, concrete thing that we could do, both in Ireland, in the north of Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, is to, and I know people have, my mother has views on this. Actually, she disagrees with me, but school meals is just one very tangible thing, and it's a policy that would be reasonably easy to implement. And you know, we've all raised the point that we live in a relatively wealthy society. We can afford this, and we know, again, the evidence base is there. The education outcomes for children are better. Health outcomes for children are better. You know, knock-on effects of that in terms of the wider implications for the health system and costs therein. You know, there's going to be benefits there. So this shouldn't be something that should be too tricky to sell to a policymaker or a decision maker, because there are wider benefits, and we have, you know, such an evidence base at this point. So I know that it is beginning to be taken seriously as a policy option, but that is one, you know, concrete, tangible thing that could be done within our system right now that would have huge benefits and which would have a massive impact on child poverty. So I think that's something that we should be really pushing, both here and in the Republic of Ireland.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, you obviously in your Solidarity Hub did quite a bit of work with children as well, and continue to.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. You know, like one of the key demands of the Right to Food campaign is around universal free school meals, and I think that is key on a number of fronts, and you've touched on them all, in terms of the benefits, in terms of young people's health, in terms of removing barriers to their education. You know, and I've given examples of how communities are responding to that currently, but certainly we need to see that factored in. And child poverty certainly needs to be factored into an anti-poverty strategy when that does eventually come about. You know, one other thing I just want to touch on is in terms of creating food systems in communities as well, which is, I think, important. And there are some people who are in the room today are really the driving force around that in Belfast, and I've been really inspired by their work in Belfast, and I've seen it at a very small level within my own community as well. But again, simple things, you know, I've kind of been talking to developers who are developing new housing projects throughout my communities in West Belfast and across the city, and maybe holding to them to say, start looking at some of the issues that are impacting people, and basically trying to tie them down to create growing spaces so we can create sustainable food systems within new developments to come along. So I think that needs to be a stipulation for all new housing developments, that we can actually create community gardens, community spaces where people can grow food and incorporate it into more healthy and nutritious meals. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay. Any further questions? Yes, go ahead, Aileen.
Thanks very much. Elena, you had some fantastic recommendations for us, which we have a lot of work to do and a lot of thinking to do about. But one of them was bringing in the voice of the academic and researcher more strongly into the conversation. Could you comment on how you think that might play out, or what can we do to make that happen? And I know there's probably others in the room who could contribute to the conversation.
Yeah, I might get Sinead to jump in here at some point as well. Yeah, I think it is important. I think more broadly it's important probably for academics and researchers to get involved in public discussions on matters of social justice and matters of social policy and health policy. In our research centre, in Health Promotion Research Centre in the University of Galway, we place a lot of emphasis on knowledge translation, because we do these reports and we do this research, and you know, we come up with these recommendations and these great findings, but then very few people want to read a 160-word report that is full of like dense academic ideas and whatnot. So we try and find ways that we can better communicate our findings, and we try and do that through different platforms. Like just last week, I had something published in The Conversation, for example, on a totally different topic on sexual health. So I think there's ways in which we can better, I think we should and we need to better engage with the public, and through participation in events like this, and through, you know, kind of greater civic engagement, and bringing the campus, the university campus, out into the community a bit more. I think that's really, really important. It is a tricky one when it comes to engaging with the media. A lot of people don't feel comfortable doing that. A lot of people just generally don't feel comfortable doing that. So I think that highlights then that need, as we kind of discussed in those recommendations, to, you know, if people are going to be doing that, then to facilitate training for them and to kind of have experts like Sophie to help us, because it shouldn't be that complicated, but it is challenging for people to get up on a stage or to, you know, speak into a microphone. So, you know, if we can, you know, through the creation of a panel like that, and provide access to whether it's a lived experience expert or an academic expert, to help support them get their ideas out into the wider discursive ecosystem. I think that will kind of help mitigate the sort of surface level one-dimensional reporting on not just this topic but on lots of different topics. So yeah, absolutely, I think these are things that we can do.
Okay, thank you. One further question online, if that's okay, Sophie, for you first. Have you suggestions for framing the complexities of rural food poverty to highlight the difficulties in rural communities?
So I think this is where really that recommendation about showing how what surrounds us shapes us, and really painting a picture of sort of, you know, what access and challenges to access to affordable healthy food can look like in, for example, in a rural community where you can't necessarily access a big supermarket, where it might be cheaper to fill up your shopping basket with things that you need. Just literally spelling that out for people, I think is hugely helpful. Those sort of differences, and even just like where you live, can make this much harder. And that showing up in different ways in people's lives, but doing that, showing, not just telling, and that how that surrounding actually shapes us, shapes our health, shapes those options and opportunities, I think is really massive for that sort of challenge in rural communities.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the family food choices study, which Safefood ran a couple of years ago, had a really good example of this actually in one of the participants, if I recall, where there's a mother, a young mother living in a very rural part of Ireland, and had a budget of €35 per week for her food. And where she was living was approximately half an hour to the nearest supermarket, and 20 kind of minutes into the next village, where there was a food bank initiative being run at the time. This was during COVID. And I often draw on this example when I'm teaching social determinants of health, and we're talking about choices or lack thereof, and kind of the options and opportunities that people have. And so for this young woman, you know, she had to have a car because there's no public transport system. So that's, you know, X amount from her budget straight away. The only supermarket is half an hour away, and there are limited options there. Or there's maybe one that's closer up the road, but things are a lot pricier. So in terms of when you're talking about options and choices that people have in rural areas where they're not well served by public amenities very often in terms of transport and whatnot, and just availability and accessibility of stores and whatnot, of course that feeds into a very distinct and a different experience of food poverty than perhaps people are experiencing in the cities. But they're two sides of the same coin, really, aren't they? Like it's just, it is around that access and that availability piece, and just the challenges and the barriers that are put in people's ways to accessing quality and quantity of food that they need to support their well-being. So yeah, different experiences, but you know again, these are upstream upstream factors that are pushing people into food poverty. So you know, we need to address them at that upstream level.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions in the room? I have one more online here. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Ernest Purvis, Children Northern Ireland. We deliver school holiday food programmes, and we also lobby government here for more support for children. Sophie, you mentioned that there's some research that shows that rights-based approaches can backfire if they're not accompanied by good context explanation. Just wondering if you could expand on that a bit more, especially, you know, when we're seeing one of the biggest obstacles in our political engagement around maybe a particular minister or a decision maker who is a bit stuck in terms of that individualism and fatalism? How do we kind of ensure that when we are taking forward a rights-based conversation that we do it effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess expanding a bit more on some of the sort of less desirable things that we've seen in some of various bits of research where we try a sort of rights-based frame. Yeah, either we sort of can see that people just don't particularly engage with it because it can be a bit nebulous when not explained. It's kind of like, oh, rights, I've heard of them, don't really know how they work if you're not already engaged. And secondly, when it comes to sort of children's rights, we can sort of see this kind of writing off of like, oh, children have too many rights these days, almost. Or a sort of sense of, okay, but to make sure that person has their rights, what does that mean for me? And it can kind of activate this kind of, I guess, a form of othering, that kind of zero-sum thinking of like, well, for that group to get that targeted support is something being taken away from me. So it's triggering some unhelpful ways of thinking, which I think can be dealt with absolutely by spelling out what we really mean. The fact that when something is a right, it's because it's essential, it's because it enables, children to thrive, it enables X, Y, Z. So that as one thing. And I secondly say that something that we saw in our poverty research, the sort of value that we encourage people to sort of appeal to is this kind of combined sense of compassion and justice, which I think goes hand in hand with that sort of rights-based approach, but it's just coming at it from a slightly different angle. It's that sense of, it isn't right that some of us don't have access to this and are not this isn't fulfilling this essential need. It's essentially the same conversation but framed slightly differently, or sort of adding a bit more meat to the bones of the right to food. So do definitely have a read of some of that, reach out. But I'd say it's essentially telling that fuller story, and really what does it mean when we talk about rights? We're talking about a sense of justice, a sense of compassion, a shared need, which cannot be left unmet.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? There's one online here. You've touched on a very interesting point with mental health. What actions can we as a society put in practice to help ourselves and each other in terms of food choices? So what actions can we as a society put in practice to help ourselves and each other in terms of food choices?
Yeah, again, just to go back to one of the points I made, I think it's about changing the mindset, and I have seen real kind of positive progression when it comes to people looking at growing their own food. I think we need to get into the mindset of doing that and kind of highlighting the many benefits of that. Many people are being outpriced when it comes to the food to keep them healthy. Certainly in terms of certainly activities that I and we have been involved in. It's about getting people out and into the outdoors. It's about bringing people together and the huge benefits that comes from growing and eventually eating sort of good, nutritious food. So I think changing the mindset around that, and certainly I think there's a role there for local government and government to create spaces for people to do that as well. So yeah, certainly work to do on that front.
Okay. Any further questions on the floor? Last question, really, I suppose, if there's one sort of final message that each of you would like to provide to the room and to our delegates online as regards the key theme of today, which is changing how we talk about food poverty. Sophie, if I could maybe just start with yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, the one thing I would encourage you to take away is that kind of, I've shared lots of different ways that you can kind of bring this story to life, but I think the sort of strength in numbers point of, I think it's so fantastic that we're all, here today talking about this, and because you're starting with not just one person changing the story, it's, actually building on great work that I'm sure you will already have been doing. And I think sort of keeping up that momentum and a shared story and using framing to do that means that you can still, speak as individuals, as organisations, but just drawing on a sort of shared story, which is more likely to be heard.
Okay, thank you. Elena?
Yeah, I think I'm going to pretty much echo what Sophie said there. I mean, we're all in this room, and everyone is in this room because there's pretty much a common purpose here. And so, as activists and as stakeholders, as academics, as researchers who have a shared purpose, we need a shared and a common language. And if we can put that through our communications, I think that's going to have a lot more impact than, you know, like you had your graph with people are all shouting in slightly different ways, you know. So I think, you know, these are good opportunities to develop that common language, that shared language, and to use that going forward to advocate for the change that we want to see.
Okay, thank you. Paul, finally.
Yeah, absolutely agree. You know, I think today, on a personal level, I think today has been hugely beneficial for me, making connections, but also like learning here as well, you know, in terms of how we approach. I don't think we ever stop learning because we constantly have to adapt in terms of what's ahead of us, but I think it's important that we keep the conversation going. And in terms of what we all want to achieve here, it's eradicating poverty from society. You know, we need to do that with one voice and as a collective, and I think certainly moving forward on an all-island basis, I think we certainly need to work together and a lot more closely in order to one day achieve that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Just really thank you. It's been just for me to really close the event now, and to thank you all today for those who've attended, particularly in person, but also all of our delegates online as well, out of your busy schedules that you have. To join us and to go through. I particularly obviously like to thank our presenters, Sophie, Elena and Paul, for all the work that you've done, and for the publication of your report today, Elena, on communicating food poverty, and for the wider contributors that are in the room to that research as well, who've taken the time to come today, and Safefood, who very much have managed that as well. To Paul, for your Food Stock and Community Solidarity Hub, and how you've really brought the people of West Belfast and the community spirit into the room to us all today, and made that alive for us, and looked at the issues that it's raising, and the Right to Food campaign. And Sophie, as well, all of the work that you've done around framing, and you've certainly made me think as well. I had some statistics for my closing remarks, but I've put a pen through them because I haven't quite got the context, the full context, so I've got a real lesson to learn as well. So every opportunity you get, you do learn something new. So it's been really useful, and you've certainly made me think as well. So thank you so much. Can I maybe just finish? There's a bit of housekeeping, if that's okay. There's going to be a QR code come on the screen now, and that'll allow you to sign up to our All-Ireland Food Poverty Network newsletter. And this will notify you of annual events, so it's due to come up on the screen shortly. And then for those who are online, when the live stream ends, you will automatically be directed to a feedback survey, which we'd really value that you complete. And if you would like a certificate of attendance, you will need to provide your email address into that feedback survey. So I would ask all our delegates online if you could complete that. That would be really useful. Thank you. And we could just say bye to our friends online at the moment, and thank you for your time with us this morning.